For decades, we were told that fat is the enemy. But that advice left millions of people running low on the exact nutrients their brain, their heart, and their joints depend on to work properly. Good fat is not the villain of your diet. It is the fuel your body has been asking for. My name is John, and today we are looking at 16 foods, most of them straight out of the pages of Scripture, that are loaded with the healthy fats and omega-3s that a modern plate is usually missing. These are not exotic superfoods flown in from the other side of the planet. They were sitting on tables in the ancient Near East thousands of years ago, and they still belong on your table today. And as always, this content is not intended as professional medical or nutritional advice. It does not replace any medication or treatment prescribed by a qualified healthcare professional. Always consult a qualified doctor before making changes to your diet, supplement, or health routine. Food number 1, olive oil. If there is one fat that runs through the entire Bible from beginning to end, it is olive oil. Priests were anointed with it. Kings were crowned with it. The lamps in the temple burned on it. Even the name of the Mount of Olives tells you how central this tree was to daily life in ancient Israel. What makes olive oil so valuable is not just tradition, it is chemistry. It is one of the richest natural sources of monounsaturated fat, the kind of fat that helps lower the bad cholesterol in your blood without touching the good cholesterol you actually want to keep. Decades of research out of the Mediterranean region, where olive oil has been the primary cooking fat for thousands of years, keep pointing to the same pattern. Communities that use olive oil as their main fat source tend to have noticeably lower rates of heart disease and stroke compared to communities relying on butter or heavily processed oils. Extra virgin olive oil in particular carries a compound called oleocanthal, which has a mild anti-inflammatory effect in the body, working through some of the same pathways as common anti-inflammatory medication, just far more gently. For older adults dealing with joint stiffness or general inflammation, that is not a small thing. A tablespoon or two drizzled over vegetables, bread, or a bowl of soup is enough to bring real benefit without turning your diet upside down. There is also a practical shopping tip worth passing along. Not every bottle labeled olive oil on a grocery shelf is created equal, and some have been diluted with cheaper, less beneficial oils. Looking for a bottle marked extra virgin, ideally in a dark glass container that protects it from light, gives you the best chance of getting the real thing with its full nutrient profile intact. Store it in a cool, dark cupboard rather than next to the stove, since heat and light both break the oil down faster than most people realize. Food number 2, quail. Quail shows up in one of the most dramatic provision stories in the entire Old Testament. In the book of Exodus, and again in Numbers, the Israelites are wandering through the wilderness complaining about the lack of meat in their diet. And God responds by sending enormous flocks of quail, migrating birds that dropped low enough to the ground from exhaustion after their long flight, that the people could simply gather them by hand. For a group of former slaves with no livestock of their own, this was an unexpected and welcome source of real animal fat and protein. Quail meat is leaner than most red meat, but it still carries a reasonable amount of healthy fat relative to its size, along with a notable amount of iron and B vitamins, particularly B12, which supports nerve function and the production of red blood cells. Because quail are migratory birds that build up fat reserves for long-distance flight, that stored fat includes a modest amount of omega-3, similar in principle to the reasoning behind wild game generally carrying a somewhat healthier fat profile than heavily grain-fed farm animals. In sensible portions, quail is a lean, nutrient-dense source of animal fat, and it remains a delicacy in many parts of the world today. The wilderness story is not really a warning against quail itself. It is a reminder that moderation matters, even with food that was, quite literally, a miracle. Quail is less common in everyday grocery stores than chicken, but it is often available through butchers or specialty markets, and it cooks quickly because of its small size, usually roasting or grilling in well under half an hour. The flavor is often described as somewhere between chicken and a milder version of duck, richer than chicken breast but not overwhelming, which makes it approachable even for people who have never tried game birds before. It is also a naturally portion-controlled meal, since a single quail is roughly one modest serving on its own. Food number 3, fish. So much of the New Testament happens near water. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were fishermen before they were anything else. Jesus fed 5,000 people with 2 fish and a handful of loaves. After the resurrection, one of the most tender scenes in the Gospels happens on the shore of that same sea, with Jesus cooking fish over a charcoal fire for his tired, hungry friends. Fish was not a special occasion food back then. It was daily bread pulled straight out of the water. The reason fish earns a spot on almost every list of healthy fats today comes down to 2 compounds most people have heard of, but might not fully understand: EPA and DHA. These are omega-3 fatty acids, and they are different from the fats found in nuts and seeds because your body can use them directly without needing to convert them first. DHA in particular makes up a large part of the structure of your brain and the retina of your eye, which is why regular fish consumption has been linked in study after study to sharper memory and better long-term brain health, especially as people get older. Omega-3s from fish also help lower triglycerides, the fat that circulates in your bloodstream, and they have a mild blood-thinning effect that can support healthy circulation. For anyone concerned about heart health, eating fish 2 or 3 times a week is one of the most consistently supported dietary habits in all of nutrition research, biblical connection or not. The one thing worth knowing is that not all fish are equal here. Smaller fish like sardines and the tilapia, commonly caught in the Sea of Galilee, are excellent choices. Larger, longer-living predatory fish, such as swordfish or king mackerel, can accumulate higher levels of mercury over their lifetime, so it is wise to eat those less often, particularly for older adults managing other health conditions. Stick mostly to the smaller varieties, and fish remains one of the safest, most rewarding fats you can put on your plate. Canned fish is a perfectly good option too, and honestly, it is one of the most overlooked bargains in the grocery store. Canned sardines and canned salmon carry nearly the same omega-3 content as their fresh counterparts. They last a long time in the pantry, and the soft bones in canned salmon are actually a good source of calcium if you eat them along with the flesh. For anyone who finds fresh fish intimidating to cook or expensive to buy regularly, keeping a few cans in the cupboard is a simple way to build this habit without much effort at all. Food number 4, almonds. Almonds show up in Scripture in a couple of memorable moments. In Genesis, when Jacob sends his sons back to Egypt during the famine, he tells them to carry a gift for the powerful stranger they will meet there. And among the items packed for that trip are almonds, treated as something valuable enough to serve as a peace offering. Later, in the book of Numbers, Aaron's staff is the one that miraculously buds, blossoms, and produces ripe almonds overnight as a sign of God's choosing out of all the tribal staffs laid before the Lord. Almonds are one of the better sources of healthy fat you can find in a small package. Most of the fat inside an almond is monounsaturated, the same heart-supportive fat found in olive oil, and almonds are also one of the richest natural sources of vitamin E, an antioxidant that helps protect your skin and your cells from oxidative damage. A small daily handful has been shown in research to help lower LDL cholesterol, the kind that contributes to clogged arteries, while also providing magnesium, a mineral many older adults run low on that plays a role in muscle function, nerve signaling, and steady blood pressure. Almonds also have a satisfying crunch and a mild flavor that makes them easy to add into a diet without much effort. A small handful with a piece of fruit makes a simple snack, and slivered almonds work well scattered over vegetables, salads, or oatmeal. The one real caution here is allergy. Tree nut allergies are common and can be serious, so if you have never eaten almonds regularly before, or if anyone at your table has a known nut allergy, that needs to be respected. Beyond that, almonds are about as close to a perfect small fat as nature has produced, small enough to carry across a desert, valuable enough to offer as a gift, and healthy enough to still matter thousands of years later. One small detail that trips people up is the skin on the almond. That thin brown layer is actually where a large share of the antioxidants are concentrated, so buying raw or dry roasted almonds with the skin still on gives you more benefit than blanched almonds with the skin removed. Soaking raw almonds overnight in water is an old trick some people use to soften the texture and make them a little easier to digest, though it is entirely optional and comes down to personal preference. Food number 5. Walnuts. The Song of Solomon contains a beautiful line where the speaker describes going down into a garden of nuts to look at the fruit of the valley, and many Bible scholars believe this passage refers specifically to a walnut garden, since walnut trees were cultivated across the hill country of ancient Israel, and the wider region for their shade and their rich, oily fruit. Walnuts were valuable enough to be grown deliberately in tended gardens, rather than simply gathered wild, which tells you something about how prized they were. Of every tree nut commonly eaten today, walnuts stand out for one specific reason. They contain the highest amount of plant-based omega-3 fat, called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA for short. Your body can convert a portion of this ALA into the same beneficial compounds found in fatty fish, though the conversion rate is modest, which is why fish still matters separately. Still, for anyone who does not eat much fish, walnuts are one of the best ways to bring some omega-3 into a diet through a plant source. Beyond the omega-3 content, walnuts are rich in polyphenol antioxidants, and several studies have connected regular walnut consumption with improved cholesterol profiles and better markers of blood vessel function. There is also a growing body of research suggesting walnuts may support cognitive function in older adults, which lines up neatly with an old folk observation that walnuts, split open, actually resemble a small brain. Because walnuts are calorie-dense, a small handful, roughly a quarter cup, is really all you need on a given day to get the benefit without overloading your daily calorie intake. They pair well with dried fruit, added to a bowl of oatmeal, or simply eaten plain as a snack. There are no major health warnings tied to walnuts beyond the standard nut allergy caution, which makes them one of the easiest additions on this entire list. Fresh walnuts do go rancid faster than most other nuts because of that high fat content, so it is worth buying smaller amounts more often rather than a large bag that sits in the pantry for months. Storing them in the refrigerator or freezer extends their freshness considerably, and it is easy to tell when they have turned, since rancid walnuts develop a noticeably bitter, unpleasant taste compared to their normal mild, slightly sweet flavor. Food number 6. Pistachios. Back in that same passage in Genesis where Jacob sends gifts to Egypt alongside the almonds, most Bible translations list a small amount of nuts, and many scholars translate that word specifically as pistachios, a tree that has grown across the hills of the Middle East since long before recorded history. Like the almonds carried in that same bundle, pistachios were considered valuable enough to send as a gift to a foreign ruler during a famine, which says a great deal about how highly they were regarded. Pistachios have a nutritional profile that is a little different from most other nuts. They contain a healthy mix of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fat, along with a notably higher amount of protein and fiber per serving compared to many other nuts, which makes them a good choice for keeping you full and steady between meals. They are also one of the better plant sources of potassium, a mineral that plays a direct role in maintaining healthy blood pressure, something particularly relevant for older adults managing cardiovascular health. Pistachios are rich in lutein and zeaxanthin, two antioxidants better known for showing up in leafy greens, and these compounds accumulate in the retina of the eye, where research suggests they help protect vision and may reduce the risk of age-related macular degeneration over time. That is a meaningful benefit for a snack food, and it is one many people never associate with nuts at all. Because pistachios usually come in the shell, there is actually a built-in portion control benefit. Cracking each shell by hand naturally slows down how quickly you eat them, which many nutritionists point to as a quiet advantage over nuts that come pre-shelled in a bag. As with all tree nuts, anyone with a nut allergy should avoid them entirely, but for everyone else, a small handful a few times a week is an easy, ancient habit worth picking back up. When buying pistachios, unsalted or lightly salted varieties are the better everyday choice, since the heavily salted versions sold as bar snacks can add up quickly if you are watching your sodium for blood pressure reasons. Roasted pistachios still hold on to most of their healthy fat and antioxidant content, so there is no need to insist on raw ones, and the roasting actually brings out a richer flavor that many people find more enjoyable to snack on regularly. Food number 7, flaxseed. Flax is woven into the Bible almost literally. The plant was grown across the ancient Near East, primarily for its fiber, which was spun into linen, the fabric used for priestly garments and fine clothing throughout Scripture. In the book of Joshua, Rahab hides the Israelite spies under stalks of flax drying on her rooftop. What gets less attention is that the same plant producing that prized fiber also produces a small, nutrient-dense seed that ancient households pressed for oil and added to bread and porridge. Flaxseed holds the title for the richest plant source of omega-3 fat available anywhere in the modern food supply, even ahead of walnuts. A single tablespoon of ground flaxseed contains more alpha-linolenic acid than most people would get from an entire day of eating other plant foods. That omega-3 content has been linked in research to lower inflammation markers throughout the body and modest improvements in cholesterol levels, particularly when flaxseed replaces less healthy fats in the diet rather than simply being added on top. Flaxseed is also one of the richest sources of lignans, a type of plant compound with mild hormone balancing properties that some research has connected to a reduced risk of certain hormone-related cancers, along with improved digestive regularity thanks to its high fiber content. For older adults dealing with constipation, a spoonful of ground flaxseed stirred into oatmeal or yogurt can make a real, noticeable difference. There are 2 practical notes worth mentioning. Whole flax seeds pass through the digestive system largely undigested, so grinding them fresh or buying them pre-ground is the only way to actually absorb the nutrients inside. And flaxseed oil in particular should be kept refrigerated and used within a couple of months, since the same healthy fats that make it valuable also make it prone to going rancid quickly once exposed to heat and light. A simple way to build the habit is stirring a spoonful of ground flaxseed into your morning oatmeal, yogurt, or a glass of water, since the flavor is mild and nutty and does not overpower whatever it is added to. Start with a small amount if you are not used to extra fiber in your diet, since adding too much too quickly can cause some temporary bloating, and increase the amount gradually over a couple of weeks as your digestive system adjusts. Food number 8, sesame seeds and tahini. Sesame is one of the oldest cultivated crops in the entire ancient Near East, grown and traded across the region for its oil long before olive trees dominated the landscape. Historical and archaeological records place sesame farming in the areas surrounding ancient Israel and Mesopotamia going back thousands of years, and sesame oil was one of the most commonly used cooking fats in kitchens across the biblical world, valued both for cooking and for its usefulness in ointments and perfumes. Ground into a paste, sesame becomes tahini, a staple that still appears on tables across the Middle East today in dishes like hummus. Sesame seeds are made up mostly of healthy, unsaturated fat, along with a good amount of plant-based protein, making them more filling than most other seeds of a similar size. They also happen to be one of the better plant sources of calcium, which matters a great deal for older adults working to maintain bone density and reduce the risk of fractures. Sesame seeds contain two unique compounds, sesamin and sesamol, that function as antioxidants in the body and have been studied for their potential to help lower cholesterol and reduce blood pressure when eaten regularly as part of the diet. There is also early research suggesting sesame's healthy fat profile may support healthy blood sugar regulation, which is relevant for anyone managing prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Sesame seeds are easy to work into daily meals, sprinkled over bread, stirred into a salad dressing, or eaten as tahini spread on toast or blended into a dip. The only real caution is that sesame is one of the recognized major food allergens, so anyone with a known sesame allergy needs to steer clear entirely. For everyone else, this tiny seed carries a surprising amount of nutritional weight for something so small. Tahini in particular is worth keeping in the refrigerator once opened, and it is common for the natural oil to separate and rise to the top of the jar, which just means it needs a good stir before use rather than being a sign anything has gone wrong. A spoonful of tahini whisked with a little lemon juice, garlic, and water makes a simple sauce that works well drizzled over roasted vegetables, and it is a far gentler way to get healthy fat into a meal than reaching for a heavier, more processed dressing. Food number 9, lamb fat. This one might surprise you because the Bible is actually very specific about fat. In the book of Leviticus, when instructions are given for sacrificial offerings, the fat portions of the animal are consistently set apart as the part given to God, described as a food offering of a pleasing aroma. Many of the sheep raised in the ancient Near East were fat-tailed breeds, prized specifically for the large deposit of fat stored at the base of the tail, which was considered a delicacy and a mark of a well-raised, healthy flock. Fat from sheep and lamb is mostly saturated fat, which puts it in a different category from the plant and fish fats covered earlier on this list. In moderate amounts, as part of a diet otherwise rich in vegetables, fiber, and unsaturated fats, lamb fat provides fat-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamin A and vitamin E, along with a modest amount of the same type of conjugated fatty acids found in other grass-fed ruminant animals, which some research suggests may have mild anti-inflammatory properties. The honest, straightforward health note here is that saturated fat, eaten in large quantities, raises LDL cholesterol for many people and is linked to a higher risk of heart disease over time, So, lamb fat is best treated the way it was traditionally treated, as a special, occasional portion rather than a daily staple, particularly for anyone already managing high cholesterol or heart disease. What ancient herding communities understood, even without modern lab tests, was balance. Fat was valuable precisely because it was not eaten carelessly or constantly. It showed up at feasts, at sacrifices, at moments that mattered. That same principle holds up well today. A well-trimmed cut of lamb, enjoyed occasionally, fits comfortably into a healthy diet. The version to be cautious with is the large, regular portions of pure fat that ancient tables reserved for rare celebration, not everyday eating. A practical modern approach is trimming visible fat off a cut of lamb before cooking, or choosing leaner cuts like leg of lamb over fattier cuts, while still enjoying the rich flavor the meat itself provides. Roasting or grilling, rather than frying, also helps some of the excess fat render away during cooking instead of ending up on your plate. None of this means lamb needs to disappear from your diet entirely. It simply means treating the fat portion the way the ancient world did, as something set aside and eaten with intention rather than in excess. Food number 10, butter and ghee. The phrase "a land flowing with milk and honey" appears again and again throughout the Old Testament as shorthand for abundance and blessing, and butter shows up in some memorable scenes tied directly to hospitality. In Genesis, Abraham serves curds and milk to the 3 visitors who arrive at his tent. In the book of Judges, Jael offers the fleeing general Sisera a bowl of curdled milk, essentially an early form of butter, before the story takes its dramatic turn. Dairy fat was a genuine gesture of welcome and generosity in that culture. Butter, and its clarified cousin ghee, which is butter with the milk solids removed, are both concentrated sources of saturated fat, similar in that respect to lamb fat. But they also carry fat-soluble vitamins, particularly vitamin A, vitamin D, and vitamin K2, nutrients that your body can only absorb properly when eaten alongside fat, which is exactly what butter provides. Ghee, in particular, contains butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that research has linked to a healthier gut lining and reduced intestinal inflammation. Ghee has an advantage over regular butter in that removing the milk solids also removes lactose and most of the casein protein, which makes it easier to tolerate for people with mild dairy sensitivities. It also has a higher smoke point, meaning it holds up better under heat without breaking down into harmful compounds, something regular butter cannot do as well. As with lamb fat, the honest note here is moderation. Butter and ghee are calorie-dense and high in saturated fat, so for anyone managing cholesterol or heart disease, a small amount used thoughtfully, rather than a diet built around it, is the wiser path. A little butter on warm bread, in the spirit of that ancient hospitality, is a genuine pleasure that fits comfortably into a healthy pattern of eating. Grass-fed butter, when you can find it, tends to have a slightly better fat profile than butter from grain-fed cattle, carrying a bit more of those beneficial conjugated fatty acids mentioned earlier with lamb. It is not a requirement, just a small upgrade worth knowing about if it is available and affordable where you shop. Ghee, because it lacks the milk solids that can burn, is particularly well suited to pan-frying vegetables or eggs, giving you that rich, buttery flavor without the risk of it scorching in a hot pan the way regular butter sometimes does. Food number 11, goat's milk. Proverbs chapter 27 contains a wonderfully practical line of advice, telling the reader to know well the state of their flocks, because there will be goat's milk enough for the food of the household. Goats were often easier to keep than cattle in the rocky, hilly terrain of ancient Israel, able to graze on rough vegetation that cattle could not survive on, which made goat's milk one of the most dependable everyday sources of dairy fat and protein in ordinary households, not just among the wealthy. Goat's milk has a slightly different fat structure than cow's milk. It contains a higher proportion of medium-chain fatty acids, which the body can break down and use for energy more quickly and more easily than the longer-chain fats found in most cow's milk. This is part of the reason many people who find cow's milk heavy or difficult to digest often tolerate goat's milk noticeably better, even though it is not naturally lactose-free. The fat globules in goat's milk are also smaller than those in cow's milk, which contributes to easier digestion. And goat's milk provides a good amount of calcium and phosphorus, both important for maintaining bone strength, along with riboflavin, a B vitamin involved in energy production throughout the body. Goat's milk is still a source of saturated fat, so the same general guidance applies as with other dairy fats. Enjoy it as part of a varied diet rather than in unlimited quantity, particularly for anyone monitoring cholesterol. For people who have struggled with regular milk, though, goat's milk is genuinely worth trying, and it remains a staple in many parts of the world today, for exactly the same reasons it mattered to households reading that proverb thousands of years ago. Goat's milk has a slightly stronger, more distinct flavor than cow's milk, which catches some people off guard the first time they try it. It tends to be better received served cold, and it works well in coffee, poured over cereal, or used in place of cow's milk in most recipes without much noticeable difference in the final result. Goat cheese, made from the same milk, has become widely available in most grocery stores now, offering another easy way to work this ancient staple into a modern kitchen. Food number 12, cheese and curds. Cheese gets a couple of direct mentions in the Old Testament that are easy to miss on a casual read. In 1 Samuel, when Jesse sends David to check on his brothers at the battlefield, he tells him to carry 10 cuts of cheese to their commanding officer as a gift. Later, in 2 Samuel, when David is fleeing during Absalom's rebellion, a group of supporters bring him supplies that include cheese made from cow's milk, offered specifically because he and his people were described as hungry, weary, and thirsty in the wilderness. Cheese, in other words, was recovery food. Cheese is essentially concentrated milk fat and protein, made by separating out the curds and allowing the moisture to drain away, which is exactly the ancient method still used today, just refined. That concentration makes cheese calorie and nutrient dense in a small serving, delivering a meaningful amount of calcium, protein, and vitamin B12, a nutrient that many older adults become deficient in over time due to reduced stomach acid production, which affects how well the body absorbs it from food. The fermentation process involved in making many traditional cheeses also introduces beneficial bacteria, similar to what you would find in yogurt, which can support gut health in cheeses that are aged or cultured rather than heavily processed. Because cheese is a concentrated dairy fat, it does carry a notable amount of saturated fat and, in many varieties, a significant amount of sodium, so portion size matters, particularly for anyone managing blood pressure or cholesterol. A modest serving a few times a week, rather than a large amount daily, allows you to enjoy the real benefits cheese offers without overloading on saturated fat or salt. As gifts of encouragement to a tired traveler go, cheese has held up remarkably well across the centuries. Harder, aged cheeses like Parmesan tend to be naturally lower in lactose than soft, fresh cheeses, since much of the lactose is broken down or drained away during the aging process, which makes them a reasonable option for people who are somewhat lactose sensitive, but still want the flavor and nutrition cheese provides. A small amount grated over vegetables or a bowl of soup goes a long way, giving you the calcium and flavor benefit without needing a large serving to feel satisfied. Food number 13. Eggs. Eggs make an appearance in the book of Job, in one of the oldest pieces of wisdom literature in the Bible, where Job asks whether there is any flavor in the white of an egg, using it as an example of something bland on its own. Centuries later, Jesus references eggs directly in the Gospel of Luke, asking his listeners which father among them, if his son asked for an egg, would hand him a scorpion instead, using the egg as a simple, familiar symbol of a basic, trustworthy provision a parent gives a child. Eggs have gone through a strange reputation over the past several decades, unfairly blamed for cholesterol problems they were never truly responsible for causing in most healthy people. The fat inside an egg yolk is a genuinely well-balanced mix, and the yolk also carries choline, a nutrient essential for brain function and memory that a large share of adults do not get enough of, along with lutein and zeaxanthin, the same eye-protecting antioxidants mentioned earlier with pistachios. Current nutrition research has largely walked back the old blanket warnings against eggs, with most major health organizations now agreeing that for the average healthy adult, an egg a day fits comfortably within a balanced diet without meaningfully raising heart disease risk. The protein in eggs is also considered one of the most complete and easily used protein sources found in any food, which matters for older adults working to maintain muscle mass. The one group that still needs a personal conversation with their doctor is anyone with existing heart disease or a specific cholesterol condition, where dietary cholesterol has been flagged as a personal concern, since individual response can vary. For most people, though, this small, humble food that Job used as an example of blandness turns out to be one of the more nutritionally complete items on this entire list. How you cook an egg matters more than people often realize. Boiling, poaching, or gently scrambling an egg preserves its nutrients far better than frying it at high heat in a large amount of oil, which can create compounds that partially offset the benefit. A soft boiled or poached egg over vegetables, or simply hard-boiled and kept in the refrigerator for a quick snack, is one of the simplest and most nutrient-dense small meals available, and it takes only a few minutes to prepare. Food number 14, pomegranate seeds. Few fruits appear as often or as beautifully throughout Scripture as the pomegranate. In Exodus, God gives Moses extremely specific instructions for the robe worn by the high priest, and pomegranates embroidered in blue, purple, and scarlet thread are woven directly into the hem, alternating with golden bells. Pomegranates decorated the tops of the great bronze pillars at the entrance to Solomon's temple. They appear repeatedly in Song of Solomon as a symbol of beauty and abundance, and Deuteronomy names them among the prized crops of the Promised Land itself. Inside every pomegranate are hundreds of small seeds, called arils, and those seeds contain a fat that is genuinely rare in nature, called punitic acid. It belongs to a small family of fatty acids, sometimes referred to as omega-5, and early research suggests it has strong antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties, distinct from the more familiar omega-3 fats found in fish and flaxseed. Beyond the seed oil itself, the juice and flesh surrounding those seeds are loaded with polyphenol antioxidants at levels that rival or exceed green tea and red wine. Multiple studies have looked at pomegranate consumption and cardiovascular markers, with a number of them showing improvements in blood pressure and a reduction in the oxidation of LDL cholesterol, a process that plays a direct role in the buildup of arterial plaque. Pomegranate compounds have also been studied for their potential to support joint health, which lines up with traditional folk use of pomegranate for inflammation across several ancient cultures. Eating a fresh pomegranate does take a little effort, since removing the seeds from the surrounding membrane can be messy, but the seeds themselves can be eaten whole, providing fiber along with that unique fat. There are no significant health risks associated with pomegranate seeds for most people, aside from the ordinary caution around added sugar in some bottled pomegranate juice products. So, reading the label matters more than the fruit itself. A helpful trick for removing the seeds without much mess is cutting the pomegranate in half, holding each half cut side down over a bowl of water, and tapping the back firmly with a spoon, which loosens the seeds and lets them drop into the water, while the bitter white membrane floats to the top for easy removal. The seeds themselves freeze well too, so buying a couple of pomegranates when they are in season and freezing the seeds in a bag lets you sprinkle them over salads or yogurt throughout the year. Food number 15. Olives. The oil gets most of the attention, but the whole olive itself deserves its own spot on this list. Before olives were ever pressed into oil, people were eating them cured and whole, straight off the tree, and that habit stretches back further than almost any other food custom in the region. The olive tree shows up as a symbol of peace and renewal all through Scripture. Most famously when the dove returns to Noah's Ark carrying a fresh olive leaf, the first sign that the floodwaters were finally receding. Eating the whole olive gives you something the refined oil leaves behind, which is fiber. A small handful of olives contains a meaningful amount of dietary fiber, along with vitamin E, and a collection of plant compounds called polyphenols that act as antioxidants in the body. These polyphenols help protect your cells from the everyday wear and tear caused by oxidative stress, the kind of slow cellular damage that contributes to aging and chronic disease over the years. Olives are also naturally rich in monounsaturated fat, the same heart-friendly fat found in the oil, just in a lower, more portion-controlled amount, because you are eating the fruit rather than drinking pressed fat by the spoonful. That makes whole olives a good option for people who want the cardiovascular benefit without the concentrated calories. There is one practical thing to know before you reach for a jar at the store. Most cured olives are packed in a fair amount of salt, since brining is how they have been preserved for thousands of years. If you are watching your sodium intake for blood pressure reasons, rinse them before eating or look for a lower sodium option. Beyond that small adjustment, olives are a simple, ancient snack that still holds up perfectly well against anything modern nutrition science has to offer. A few olives with some cheese and bread was a complete, satisfying meal in Bible times, and honestly, it still is today. If you are new to eating olives regularly, it is worth trying a few different varieties before deciding you do not like them. Green olives, black olives, and the smaller Kalamata style all have noticeably different textures and flavor intensity, and many people who dislike one kind end up genuinely enjoying another. They also travel well, keep for weeks in the refrigerator once opened, and require absolutely no preparation, which makes them one of the easiest healthy fats to keep on hand for a quick snack. Food number 16, figs. The fig tree might be the single most peaceful image in the entire Bible. Sitting under your own vine and fig tree is used repeatedly in the Old Testament as a picture of safety, prosperity, and rest, a household finally at peace with nothing to fear. Figs are also named alongside olive oil and pomegranates in Deuteronomy's description of the Promised Land. And in the New Testament, Jesus uses a fig tree that fails to bear fruit as a pointed teaching moment about the difference between appearance and substance. Figs are not a major source of fat on their own the way olives or nuts are, but they earn their place on this list because of how they were traditionally eaten in the ancient world, dried and pressed together with nuts, seeds, and a drizzle of olive oil, forming a genuinely balanced small meal. The fiber in figs, particularly dried figs, is substantial, and that fiber slows down how quickly sugar enters the bloodstream, which helps the fats eaten alongside them get absorbed and used more steadily rather than in one spike. Figs also carry a good amount of potassium, a mineral that works to balance sodium in the body and support healthy blood pressure, along with calcium, which is somewhat unusual for a fruit and makes figs a useful addition for older adults focused on bone health. The small edible seeds inside a fig contain a tiny amount of healthy fat themselves, a detail almost nobody thinks about while eating one. The main thing to know about figs, particularly dried figs, is that they are concentrated in natural sugar once the water content is removed, so portion size matters for anyone managing blood sugar or diabetes. A couple of dried figs, eaten alongside a handful of nuts in the old-fashioned way, remains one of the simplest, most satisfying combinations on this entire list, and it happens to be a pretty accurate picture of peace, sitting quietly under your own tree, eating what the season actually provided. Fresh figs, when they are in season, have a completely different texture than the dried version, soft and delicate with a much milder sweetness. And they do not keep long once ripe, so they are best enjoyed within a day or two of buying them. Dried figs, on the other hand, keep for months in a sealed container and travel well, which is likely part of why they became such a dependable staple in the ancient world, long before refrigeration existed. Either version, paired with a few nuts, makes for a genuinely satisfying, balanced small meal. 16 foods. And honestly, if I had to pick just one to build a habit around, I would go with olive oil. It is the easiest one to work into a meal you are already cooking, and the research behind it is about as solid as nutrition science gets. But truly, the real lesson here is not any single food. It is the pattern. Good fat, eaten in the right amounts from real, simple sources, is not something to fear. It is something your body has been asking for the whole time. One last thing before you go. I am not a doctor, and this video is not medical advice. If you are managing a health condition, taking medication, or just unsure what changes are right for you, please talk to your own doctor before making any big shifts to your diet. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.